Welcome to the U3 Media Podcast, where our mission is to unite the world through coffee, connecting you to the farmers and coffee entrepreneurs through the stories they share. I'm Kristi Ross, and joining us today is David Myers with Mighty Good Coffee and Working Title Coffee. I totally love that name, and we'll talk about that. Welcome, David. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, so where does David fit in the coffee value chain? He's a founder, a roaster, cafe owner, coffee consultant. He's been chair of the Roasters Guild and current SCA board member, host of his own podcast, and an 18-year veteran in the coffee industry. Plenty of things to talk about. Did I miss anything, David?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
That was a long list. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of your background. So what did you do before coffee? And then share with us sort of the spark to get into it.
Yeah, well, I was working for my entire career as a commercial photographer. I went to art school, so I had a lot of training in craft and process. And, the world was changing dramatically in the art world with digitalization. And I decided at some point that the future of that was not for me and I needed something else to do. And, I was taking some extension classes at UMass Amherst and got the spark for an idea about coffee. My parents were coffee fanatics early on. And I just started exploring the world of coffee a little bit and eventually landed on a guy who was selling a bunch of roasting equipment, and I just kind of jumped in.
Nice. So if my numbers are correct, today in the US, there's like 2,200 coffee roasters, and there's a couple different numbers out there, and over 70,000, coffee shops today. So the coffee business is pretty saturated. Like, did you ever obsess over like how you're going to differentiate, or did you just say, I'm just diving in because I love coffee?
I think I did a little bit of research on our local market. At the time, almost 20 years ago, there were very few craft roasters. And in our town, there were two. And it seemed like there was an opportunity there for a local brand. The person I bought the coffee equipment from had tried and failed. And so I did a little digging into his model and quickly saw some areas for improvement. And I started part-time. I did it, as kind of a hobby with a very low investment. I worked in the evenings and on the weekends. I had high school kids helping me out. So I had a long lead. I hadn't quit cold turkey on several other projects that I was working on. And so I still had streams of income. But about 3 years in, I realized that it was possible to leverage this into a business that was sustainable. And so, about 3 years in, I just went all in.
Yeah, I think I've heard that a lot with people's stories is that they did multiple things until they sort of could get over that first hump of saying this is sustainable. I can make a living off of this. But I feel like in the beginning, there's a lot of people that sort of did it on the side, did it as a passion, and it became a business.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, I've never really just done one thing. I've always tried to branch out and do different things, either personally or professionally. And, I think 20 years ago, certainly the market was a lot less crowded. I think there were 3 roasters in my town when I started, and now there's probably 12 and maybe 20 in the metropolitan area of southeastern Michigan, probably more. So, people ask me if I would do it today, could I be successful today? And I think it's much tougher to find your niche in the market today. And I'm grateful I started when I did. I also started during a recession when a lot of people were afraid to take risks, and I thought that was the perfect time to take a risk.
Yeah. Well, I even look back at like data of like 10 years ago, and the U.S. coffee industry was like 2/3 the size it is today. And so it's grown by 50% over 10 years, which, even as saturated as it felt back then, it still continues to grow and is expected to grow over 6% per year going forward. And it's $85 billion today, right,
Right.
in the US.
Right.
So how, David, how'd you get your first customer, whether retail customer or wholesale client? How'd you get your first customer? That question actually always fascinates me, or the answers always
Yeah.
fascinate me.
Well, I inherited a customer list from the person I bought the roasting business from. So I had, maybe 150 names of direct to consumer customers. He had started a door to door coffee business, and so I had access to that list. It was very thin, when I did a little diving into actually how it was working. But I mean, that was my start, was reaching out to all those previous customers that had not heard from him in 18 months. I think he had been shuttered. And so I just, it was almost like door to door, meeting those people again, introducing them to the coffee, and trying to build back up those relationships. And at the time, my wife was working in the food industry as well, and so we knew a lot of local food businesses around town. And I started approaching small stores, grocery stores, with my product, and convincing them that they should carry our product. And that's really how I started. It was very small, family-owned markets in town, and getting our coffee on the shelf. And eventually, I approached a medium-sized regional grocery chain, convinced a single store to carry the coffee. That worked out. They put me in 4 more stores, then 8. And then I started upping my game in terms of approaching who might carry our packaged coffee. And so I built, a combination of direct to consumer and packaged coffee for grocery pretty early on.
Right. I mean, that feels like good old fashioned pounding the pavement, getting out there and truly getting your face in front of them. But you had, to grow, as you talked about how you grew, you had to produce a good product, a great cup of coffee for that to continue to take place. So that's awesome. Okay, so where'd the name come from then? So you didn't buy the name, did you?
No, I didn't. I didn't buy the name. The company was actually called something else when I bought it. And typical. I started with web domains, and I know marketing people and business people say that's the last place you need to start looking for a name, as a .com. And I made a list of names, and a combination of domain name search and also on USPTO. So I was looking for trademark protection, and I had a friend who was a patent and trademark attorney, and so we looked at how that name could be protected down the road. And I think very early on we submitted trademark for our brand, and those kind of factors. Those are the 2 factors that I look at, is USPTO and domain name, and also something that just sounded fun.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Wait, so I want to talk about, we're going to get into your consulting business a little bit, but I really like the name of your consulting business, Working Title Coffee. Like, well, how'd you come up with that one?
Well, I mean, it's not super original. There's a lot of working title this and that out there, but I really wasn't sure what I was going to do when I started consulting. I needed another LLC for another purpose, and I wasn't sure where everything was going to head. So I just thought, well, I'll use working title because I don't know what I'm going to be yet. My own name wasn't available as a domain name, and I didn't want to make it that personal to use my own name. I know a lot of people do, and so then it stuck. People started to gravitate towards it. People that I've worked with think it's a fun name, and it allows the ability to develop and change and alter what it is as I move forward and as I kind of grow in the consulting side. That it's not a fixed point; it's always evolving. And as customers come to me and have different needs, I can grow with them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, you are involved in a lot of different things, and like you said, you never really do just one thing. By obviously proof with the full list I ran through of what you even currently do today. But when you look back over the last 18 years, what was a critical action that you took that helped your business, or whether you got involved in something or took on a role or took on a particular, client, whatever it may be. What would you say was sort of a critical action to help build your successful business?
Well, I mean, locally, I got very involved in the local market in terms of like connecting with other business owners and friends who were involved with coffee, people at the university. But I think one of the most important things I did early on is I got involved in coffee world outside of my own community, and I started attending conventions. I started raising my hand to help. I started asking a lot of questions and where can I fit. And I consider myself somewhat of a natural teacher, and so whether that was bike racing, which I used to coach, or ski instructing, which I used to do, I kind of gravitate towards those opportunities, and I got involved early on with the roasting education group, and raising my hand to volunteer, and eventually learning enough to start teaching on my own and hosting classes at different events.
Yeah. So are you a Q grader too?
I am not a Q grader.
So walk through, just share what exactly a Q grader is.
Well, a Q grader is somebody that is basically aligned with other people in the industry to determine the quality of a particular coffee. And really, what you're doing is assigning value to coffee throughout the value chain, and establishing that this coffee meets a certain standard, which is usually expressed as a score. And then people have a common language to discuss that coffee, and a place where they can then determine price, quality, and any other issues associated with that coffee in the marketplace. And originally, it was designed to raise up people at origin to understand their coffee, because as you know, a lot of people at origin actually never get the chance to taste their best coffee. And so as the world has grown, we try to shrink it by calibrating with other people around the world to determine a value of a coffee.
And so the specialty coffee, like in the range of like 85% to 90%, like that's a good quality specialty coffee.
Well, the point score starts at 80. Anything above 80 is determined as specialty, and that there's going through an evolution as we speak, a big evolution in value assessment for coffee. But yeah, I mean, most coffees are in the specialty market are in the low to mid 80s, and then as you move into higher price coffees, high 80s and low 90s.
Yeah, and that system's needed because I feel like tasting coffee is so subjective, right? So you're trying. This is about standardizing it, and but you're very involved in the SCA, the Specialty Coffee Association, and this is sort of where this stems from, right? This is where this basically is formulated from or driven from. Is it the SCA or the National Coffee Association?
Well, the standard cupping form was developed, I believe, in partnership with the SCA and CQI Coffee Quality Institute in partnership. And that form has been around since the early 2000s. I think it was developed by a group of people, and so everybody's used the same form for almost a couple decades now, and it seems to have worked pretty well. And there's of course some evolution going on in division about how that all works, and ways to assess value as the market has changed dramatically. We know way more about coffee than we used to. We know more about origins and specific farms and varietals. So it's gotten much more complex, and ways to assign value to that complexity is the next step, I think.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so people matter in everybody's journey. So tell me a little bit about maybe a mentor that made a big difference in your coffee journey.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a few people who've guided me along the way. One was a good friend of mine, Dennis Saris, who's since passed away, was in the restaurant industry in my community. And, I knew him early on in my photo career, and he always gave me amazing advice on the spur of the moment, whether it was what building to lease, risk taking, and I always looked to him when I really had a big decision about business to make. I would track him down and have dinner with him or stop by his restaurant. Another one was Ildi Revi, who was at the time the head of education for SCAA back then, and she really encouraged me to get involved in the education system. and help guide me to different certifications, to hosting classes. And I was just thinking about her yesterday when I saw this question about mentorship. In coffee, she really sparked that it's about getting involved, because if I stick inside my own community, I at some point start to believe my own story. And then when I connect with other people outside and get their perspective, whether that's tasting my coffee or vetting business ideas or just who to engage with, I mean, my community grows immensely.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So what is, you talked about your first mentor. What is sort of one big takeaway that you carry with you today from him?
Well, a couple lessons. One is he talked a lot about growth and how to scale. Some of that advice I really believed, that when you scale, you can start to focus on growth because you begin to hire people to replace you as operations, and that allows you to focus on growing outside of, when you have one place, everybody knows where you are. When you have two, you're always running back and forth, and when you have three, you have enough support staff in place to allow you to see how am I going to get to 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
And he always said it was not being accountable, but what he really meant is it allowed him to the freedom and the flexibility to think about the bigger picture. And that has stuck with me, both good and bad. I've never forgotten that piece of advice. The other thing he talked about in business is you never want to end a business relationship by having to walk down the street and cross to the other side when you see somebody that you disagreed with and you're afraid to confront that. And I thought that was a really amazing piece of advice, that you never want to end a business relationship or any relationship where you're afraid to confront that person walking down the street. And that stuck with me as well.
Yeah, never burn bridges, right?
Never burn bridges.
Yeah. So share a coffee industry stat that you continually pay attention to or that has helped you in the past. I mean, I come from the trading world originally, so, following coffee futures and the pricing totally makes sense to me, but there's other things when you're deep in the coffee industry. What are you actually watching, paying attention to?
Well, I actually do watch the C market pretty closely because it has one of the greatest impacts on my profitability and just how we run the business. And that's been one of the hugest pieces that's impacted my business in the last year and a half, as we look at shrinking margin and how much can we actually raise prices in packaged coffee and absorb the price increase as opposed to riding it out. And I've chosen to ride most of that out this year, and we're starting to see prices come back down. So I think a lot about the price of my green coffee. I pay very close attention to what I'm buying, how much I paid for it, what it's looking like down the road. Pretty important factor.
Yeah, absolutely. What's been the biggest challenge that you've run into, and how you've overcome it? Because I think that's the big thing. We're all going to run into these walls or these pits, if you can call them that, and it's about how you overcome it and how you get out of that pit.
Well, I mean, I've had a lot of challenges in the coffee industry and personally, and I think one of the things that I've learned and is the hardest lesson is knowing exactly where my lane is. I'm an opportunist. So when I see an opportunity, I usually gravitate towards that and try to work that problem. And one of the things I've really learned is that I'm a really good business startup person. I'm not really great at process and running a process-oriented business. And my business became very process-oriented. And so as I grew, I lost sight of how to manage process and around that people as well. And so, in the coffee industry, I realized that the fastest way to grow is to keep opening retail locations. And that did not, in terms of finance, that's a great playbook. In terms of my own business strengths and management skills, it's not a good tactic. And I was pretty deep into coffee shops and retail before. I think I knew that all along, that I needed good people to support me, but it's not their business, it's my business. And eventually you can't rely on people to stick around forever or to have the same level of investment that you do. No matter how much you engage them and treat them and pay them, eventually it's their life, not my life that they're leading. And so there's this constant reinventing oneself. And I realize that that's, at the end of the day, that's not for me.
I totally get that. Nobody has the passion for it like you do. Nobody
Right.
loves your business like you do. So one thing you mentioned before, as I go back to the name a little bit, and you sort of said you didn't want to make your name of your company personal or anything like that. But often businesses are a reflection of the founder's personality or style.
Sure.
If you were to take a step back and describe your business and you in 3 words, what would those 3 words be?
Oh my God. I think that's my 3 words right there. Um, I I don't know that I can narrow it down into just 3 words, but I would say, with consulting, flexibility, time, and fun.
Yeah, okay. And I've hung out with you. Like, you're fun.
Yeah, I know.
I can validate that. All right. So is there one thing that your employees don't know about you that maybe you'd want them to know or maybe not know? And now they'll know
Uh,
after you share it here.
Most people don't know that I'm being certified as a swim coach for Master Swimming. I'm working on getting certified as Adult Learn to Swim for people who haven't learned to swim. It's something I spend a lot of time doing outside of coffee. I find a swimming pool everywhere I go in the world. I try to find a place to swim. It's huge for me, whether that's the Barcelona Olympic pool, or I found a small community pool in Charleston the other day, just dropped in. And yeah, most people probably don't know that about me.
I love that. I may have to take your adult swimming classes. I did a triathlon, and the swimming leg, I almost drowned.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That is awesome. Totally love that. Okay, so share a story or a moment or something that sticks out in your mind that is going to forever leave an impression, good or bad, during your coffee journey.
Well, I mean, I tell people this a lot, and because we've traveled to Origin together, um, and that's an opportunity not many people in the coffee industry get. But if you haven't traveled to Origin and you haven't stood on a hillside picking your own coffee for an hour, you don't fully understand what it means to get one coffee cherry into a basket, into a machine that takes it all off and ends up eventually delivering it to your cup. And as I've traveled, pretty extensively through Central and South America and watching that process, I tell people when they spill coffee in my shop, somebody's hands touched that before it ended up on the floor, and we should try to be respectful of that. And I try to remember that, whether the coffee is good or bad, that there is a human interaction involved, almost everywhere in the world, and to just try to keep that in mind.
That is so powerful, and I agree. If you haven't gone to Origin and seen that, you don't fully grasp how powerful that is. I diving into coffee myself, learning everything I can, reading literally the World Atlas of Coffee, watching every single YouTube video and diving into the education, getting certified. Not until I went to Origin did I truly connect the dots. So I couldn't agree more. So David, I only have a couple more questions here, and then we will wrap it up. This is the U3 top 3 is what I call it.
All
So
right.
1-word answers, and just 3 quick questions. Your favorite brewing method?
Hario.
So for consumption, like coffee drink of choice.
Black drip, handmade.
How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
1 to 3.
Oh, interesting. So wait, are you a Gen Xer or a baby boomer?
Oh, baby boomer.
Baby boomer. Okay, so you're doing 1 to 3. You're in like the 47% of baby boomers. Like
No.
most of them drink between the 1 and 2, 1 and 3 cups a day.
Right.
So, all right. So very cool. Last thing, you've given a ton of advice like throughout this interview. Love it. But if you were to give one piece of advice to yourself 18 years ago, what would it be?
It's not about the coffee. It's about the journey.
Oh, I love that. Love that. I am so thankful for your time today, David. And I would love if you would share whatever you want, how to find out more about you or your coffee or your podcast or anything. Share with our audience where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, so our retail coffee business is mightygoodcoffee.com. You can log on, buy coffee, see everything we offer. My consulting business is Working Title Coffee, also workingtitlecoffee.com. Instagram is Mighty Good Coffee and working_title_coffee. That's where you can find me. You can find me at Probat in Chicago teaching classes and at the Roasters Guild Retreat teaching classes. I get around.
Yes, you do. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, David, and for helping us unite the world through coffee.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. That was David Myers, founder of Mighty Good Coffee and Working Title Coffee. Be sure to check him out. He is a fabulously connected coffee expert. Thanks again for joining us at U3 Coffee. We'll see you next time.